Hey, friends, what's up? What do you say? What? I feel like I probably should have stretched before I hit the record button. What can I tell you? No, friends. Today is an interesting day here in Yerushalayim because, as you know, of course, I record a little bit in advance. So today, Lamaisa is Yud Daled Adar. It's the 14th day of Adar, the place where everybody else is getting drunk, but not me. I'm recording Babylon Talmud. Tomorrow I get drunk, but I need to, but tomorrow, of course, first I need to wake up and I need to learn 2 daf of Yevamos, record 2 daf of Yevamos, and only then can I get drunk. Al Koponim, so it's the middle of the day, and I need to record Babylon Talmud. So friends, we're going to learn daf 15, daf Tes Vav of Masechta Yevamos. Alright, we'll talk about Yevamos. Well, we talk about Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Did Beis Shammai actually do like their ruling, right? Which gets, right, yesterday we were discussing the concept of agudis, that we don't want to make different groups of Yidden who are doing different things, which also related to Purim, because we said, how can we have different people reading Megillah on different days? Anyway, so the shaila is, when it comes to Yibum, we said, of course, that Beis Shammai says that the Tzaras Erva, that the co-wife of the Erva does do Yibum, whereas Beis Hillel says that she would not, as we've been assuming all along, and it's there's big nafkaminas, because of according to Beis Hillel, if she's not allowed to do Yibum, so then the relationship between the co-wife and Shimon is that of Kares, which is a really big deal. So if Beis Shammai is telling the co-wives to do Yibum, according to Beis Hillel, that's like a big deal because it's the Chiyuv Kares, Mamzerim. And even according to Beis Shammai, even according to Beis Shammai, if you do the way that Beis Hillel says that, that the co-wife could just marry anybody, well then you're being over on a lav, and the children are cholos. Children are cholos. What do you want me to tell you? So we're trying to figure out, did Beis Shammai in fact actually do in practice like they were saying? Maybe it was after the Bas Kol and they did like Beis Hillel or whatever it is. So we're trying to figure that out. So friends, we're going to start on daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. Toshma, come in here. 5 lines from the bottom. Toshma, come in here. Dom Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri he'chaloch zo ravachas b'Yisrael. Nu, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? We have Beis Shammai suggesting that the tzara, right? So let's just say Reuven, of course, is married to Sarah and Rivka. Rivka is Shimon's daughter. So according to Beis Hillel, so Rivka, Sarah, the co-wife, according to Beis Hillel, Sarah, the co-wife, does not do Yibum. According to Beis Shammai, Sarah does do Yibum. And as I said a minute ago, there are major nafkaminas in terms of the status of the children. So what do we do? So it says of Yochanan ben Nuri, Beis Shammai avlad mamzer. If we do like Beis Shammai and allow Sarah to marry Shimon, well then according to Beis Hillel, the child, right, avlad mamzer l'divrei Beis Hillel, right? According to Beis Hillel, the child is a mamzer. We don't want to create that situation. Beis Hillel, and if we do like Beis Hillel, well then havlad pogum l'divrei Beis Shammai. Well then according to Beis Shammai, the child is pogum. He's a cholol, right? That if Shimon is a kohen, so then meaning if according to Beis Hillel, so then Sarah does not do Yibum with Shimon, and she goes and marries some other guy named Levi, whatever, okay? And if this other guy named Levi, who's not a brother, happens to be a kohen, well then the child is a cholol, because according to Beis Shammai, Sarah was supposed to do Yibum with Shimon, and instead he went along and married Levi. If Levi's a kohen, so then the child is a cholol, which means that he's not allowed to practice as a kohen. So either way, it's shver. So Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Bo nesakin loyin litzaris shiu choltzes v'lo misyabmis. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri had this sort of like, maybe you could say it's a compromise, which is, why don't we just say that you always do chalitza? And that's that. So Kilu, and essentially it works out according to everybody in a certain sense, in that, well, according to Beis Shammai, that Sarah is supposed to do Yibum with Shimon, well, she can always do chalitza, that works. And according to Beis Hillel, who says that Sarah shouldn't be doing anything with Shimon, well, chalitza doesn't hurt. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, well, why don't we just do chalitza? And, Lemaisa, you can't really go wrong with that. The worst that can happen is that, according to Beis Shammai, she would be a chalutza, so she can't marry a kohen. Okay, but it's not like the absolute end of the world. So she choltzes v'lo misyabnis. But meaning the point is that, I guess that we would just assume that she's a chalutza, right? And therefore she shouldn't marry a kohen. Okay. But for whatever reason, it was never enacted. It was never sort of, how do you say that? Impracticified? No, that's not right. Impracticified. No, that's not right. Enacted maybe is close enough. It was never donified. Whatever. Amalei. Okay, at least somebody here is enjoying himself. Amalei Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Manais Elohim Netzaris Harishonis. Right? Me'ata. So now Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, wait, but, if we were to enact that everybody should do chalitza, so what does that say about the people who may have done yibum like Beis Shammai before then? If we're saying that everybody should do chalitza just to make sure that that you're not chayiv kares and your children are mamzerim, so what does that say about the people who got married? The Saras that got married to the Shimons up until now. Okay, so that's why Shimon Gamliel isn't so into that position. Now, friends, you ready? Now, so I understand if we say that that Beis Shammai mamish did like their opinion. They practiced what they preached. They right, the Saras of Beis Shammai mamish did yibum with the Shimons of Beis Shammai, and that's why Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was concerned that what do we, if we establish that everybody does chalitza, well then there are people who have mamish done yibum up until now, and we're basically saying that they shouldn't have done that, which creates issues because mamzerim and stuff. Eli Amad lo asu my manaise. But if you say that Beis Shammai did not actually do like their own rulings, then what's Reb Shimon ben Gamliel concerned about? So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok lo nitzcho ela l'tzara atzma. Says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is not concerned about the children. No, meaning you can argue that Beis Shammai really did not do like their own ruling, and therefore there's no concern about the children. What the concern is what about the tsaras themselves, right? Because according to Beis Shammai, the tsara really has a shaykhis to Shimon, really needs to do yibum, and if she just marries somebody else, well then she herself was supposed to be married to Shimon, and she marries some other guy. It's a lav, and she violated a lav, and therefore and what it means when Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is saying, what should we do about the previous examples? It means, Hanoch tsaris to Beis Hillel, that these tsaras of Beis Hillel, the tsaras of Beis Hillel, and the Shimons of Beis Hillel, well, I guess really more the tsaras of Beis Hillel, that Beis Hillel said, look, Sarah, you have no shaykhis to Shimon, go and marry Levi, some random guy named Levi. Now, the thing is, if we're saying that everybody should be doing chalitza at this point, just in case, well then what do you do to all the Saras up until now who, based on Beis Hillel's opinion, they went and married random Levis, and meaning people named Levi who are not related in any way to Reuven or Shimon, just random people, random Levis, And now we're going to go back and say, oh, really, you have to do chalitza? So Levei Shammai, so meaning out of concern of, that word that Beis Shammai would say that really they have a zika there. So what do we do for these saras? Leicholtzu. What, should they now go back retroactively after they've already been married to Levi and do chalitza? Mimaisi agavayu. That's not very, it's not a good situation for Shlom Bayis, right? Levi's wife Sarah all of a sudden is saying, oh, by the way, I need to do chalitza with Shimon because really I might be married to him. Shtikl shver. And if you're going to say, well, do it anyways and create that mess. But the pasuk in Mishlei says that all the ways of the Torah are pleasant and all of its paths are peace. And therefore, we don't want to create an uncomfortable situation between Sarah and Levi. So that was Reb Shimon Gamliel's problem. Reb Shimon Gamliel's problem was that, what are you going to do about the Saras of the world who've already married the Levis of the world? You can't just tell them now to do chalitza, it creates a mess. Toshma, come in here. To Omer Reb Tarfon, that says Reb Tarfon, and Rashi points out that Reb Tarfon was from the students of Beis Shammai. To Oveni, I desire Mosai Tovo Tzoras Habas Liodi Ve'esoeno. Friends, do you hear this? Reb Tarfon was from Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says that the saras of the world, the saras of the world would do yibum. Says Reb Tarfon, I desire that my daughter Rivka should be married to my brother Ruvain, and that there should be another wife there in Sarah, and that Ruvain should die, and I will marry Sarah. Kilu, he was saying that, he was putting all of his support behind Beis Shammai, and saying that, he's all for marrying the co-wife of an erva, like Beis Shammai says. So that definitely sounds like Asu. Definitely sounds like they were practicing what they were preaching, to the extent that Reb Tarfon says, I'm all in. So, Ema va'asi eno. No, so rather say, and I will marry her off to somebody else. That ki'ilu, you won't actually marry the tzara. Maybe you could say that they wouldn't actually do it. It means that he would marry her off to somebody else. V'ate aveni ka'amar. But what do you mean? He says, I desire to do it. He's making a point here. He's making a chiddush. That it's like Beis Shammai, that he wants to do like Beis Shammai. So we say, no, it's to the exclusion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Kiluvasi ena, I will marry her off, but not that I will do chalitza. Okay, fine. So not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but rather, you could say that it means that we don't hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, we wouldn't do chalitza, but we also didn't necessarily, the people of Beis Shammai, like Reb Tarfon, did not necessarily do like Beis Shammai, that he was looking to do yibum with Sarah, rather he would marry off to somebody else, like Beis Hillel. Alright, what do you want me to tell you? Tashma, come in here. Mais bito Rabban Gamliel. There's a story with the daughter of Rabban Gamliel. What do you think her name was? I don't know. Let's call her Rivka. Friends, if not to make things exciting enough, guess what Rabban Gamliel's brother's name was? Abba. As if things aren't confusing enough, you have a guy whose brother's name is Father. So basically, Rabban Gamliel's daughter is married to his brother whose name is Father. Friends, what do you want me to tell you? Is this some kind of joke or something? Akoponim. So Tashma, Ma'ase bebito Rabban Gamliel. There's a story with the daughter of Rabban Gamliel. Shaisa nesua la'aba ochiv, and Rabban Gamliel's daughter, we'll call her Rivka, was married to Rabban Gamliel's brother Abba, and Abba, of course, had another wife, Sarah. V'meiz beloban, and Abba, the brother, died without any children. Now, of course, he was married to Rabban Gamliel's daughter Rivka and Sarah. Sarah the Tsar, the co-wife Sarah. Okay. I don't know if these were actually the names. Of course, I'm just using the generic names. V'yibim Rabban Gamliel es Sarah also. Ho. And Rabban Gamliel, Taka did Yibum with Sarah the Tsar. Now, boom. So there you have it. Rabban Gamliel is doing Yibum with the co-wife of his daughter, i.e., with the Tsara of an erva. So what the Gemara says, well, don't get ahead of yourselves over here. V'tizbra, let me ask you a kasha. Rabban Gamliel mitamidei Beis Shammai? Was Rabban Gamliel a student of Beis Shammai? No way, no how. Who is Rabban Gamliel? Rabban Gamliel was the great grandson of Hillel, right? Hillel's son was Shimon. Shimon's son was Rabban Gamliel Azakin. Rabban Gamliel Azakin's son was Rabban Shimon Gamliel the first, and then Rabban Gamliel. So Rabban Gamliel comes from the house of Hillel, so he was not a student of Beis Shammai. So therefore, this is not a proof that Beis Shammai actually did, like the opinion of Beis Shammai, that the Tsaris would marry the brothers, right? That the Tsaris of the world would marry the Shimons of the world. No, I mean, that's definitely not the conclusion of this story, because Rabban Gamliel was not from Beis Shammai. If anything, he was from Beis Hillel, his great-great-grandfather. So Ella Shiny Bito Rabban Gamliel to Ailonis Havoy. Rabban Gamliel's daughter Rivke was Nilonis, and we learned in the Mishnah that Nilonis, somebody who's doesn't mature, and therefore because she has never matured, she's unable to have children. So the Tsara of an Ailonis would be Shaykh to Yibum, right? So if the Rivkas of the world are Ailonises, right, the Rivkas who are Ervas are Ailonises, so then the Saras of the world would do Yibum with the Shimons of the world, right? So if Rivka was an Ailonis, Sarah, even though she's, right, so Rivka, even though she's an Erva, if she's an Ailonis, so then Sarah would do Yibum with Shimon. So therefore we're saying that the reason why Gamliel married Sarah, who was the co-wife of his daughter Rivka, is because his daughter Rivka was an Ailonis. But fact the Gemara, let's read that again. From the fact that the Braise says after that, that Acherim say, that the daughter of Rabban Gamliel was an Ailonis, Michlal, that implies the Tanakama Sover Lav Ailonis Haisa. That according to the Tanakama, she was not an Ailonis, right? According to Acherim, she was an Ailonis. According to the Tanakama, she was not. So if she was not an Ailonis, so then, if she was not an Ailonis, so she was just, kind of the wife of Rabban Gamliel's brother Abba, so then how come Rabban Gamliel was doing Yibum with Sarah, the co-wife of his daughter Rivka, if she wasn't an Ailonis? So hikir ba v'lo hikir ba ike benayu. So you can say that, well, she was in fact an Ailonis. So then what's the difference between the Tanakama and Acherim? That the Acherim specifically says she's an Ailonis, and the Tanakama says that she wasn't an Ailonis. So, or it doesn't say that she's an Ailonis. Well, no. Both according to the Tanakama and according to the Acherim, she was an Ailonis, but we mentioned a possible nafkamina the other day between if Rabban Gamliel's brother Abba knew at the time that he married Rivka that she was an Ailonis. If he did, and then he decided to marry her anyways. So there's an opinion that in that case, she would be, right, it's not a mekachtos, it's not a mistake, she would be considered a wife, and therefore Sarah would be considered an erva, and therefore she would not do even with Shimon, right? But if in this case Rabban Gamliel, but if Rabban Gamliel's brother Abba did not know going into the marriage that Rivka was an Ailonis, so then we would say that I don't know what I just said. Meaning, according to this chiluk, if Rabban Gamliel's brother Abba knew that Sarah was an Ailonis Rivka was an Ailonis going into it, and he married her anyways, so then Sarah would be Tsaras Erva, and there would not be Yibum. But if Oh gosh, I keep on confusing myself. According to this chiluk, if Abba knew that Rivka was an Ilonis going into it, and he married her anyways, so in that case, she would be Asura, right? In that case, Sarah would be Asura because he knew that Rivka was an Ilonis going into it, and he married her anyway. So he's married to Rivka. Rivka is the daughter of Rabbi Gamliel. Sarah is the tzara of Rivka. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel would not be able to do yibum with him, with Sarah. But if Abba did not know that Rivka was an Ilonis going into it, then it's a mekachtos, it's a mistake, in which case it's as if it's not a real marriage, therefore, and Sarah would be permitted to Rabbi Gamliel. So the question is, so the difference between the Tanakama and Acherim is the situation where Abba knew going into the marriage that Rivka was an Ilonis. That according to the Tanakama, only in a situation where he did not know going into the marriage that Rivka was an Ilonis, that is where Sarah would be permitted to Rabbi Gamliel, and that's why Rabbi Gamliel was permitted to Sarah, because he didn't know going into the marriage. Whereas according to Acherim, it says no, in any case that Rivka is an Ilonis, in any event, whether he knew about it, whether he didn't know about it, still Rivka would be Sarah would be permitted to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Holy shnikes, it's like going back and forth over here. But anyways, so that's what's going on. So the way to understand, so either way she was an Ilonis, right? The thing is, Acherim is saying that no matter what, as an Ilonis, Rabbi Gamliel would be allowed to marry Sarah, whether Abba knew that she was an Ilonis going into it or not. Rabbi Gamliel would be allowed to do yibum with Sarah. Whereas according to the Tanakama, no, it's not in any situation, only in a situation where Abba did not know going into the marriage that Rivka was an Ilonis. Only in that case would Rabbi Gamliel be able to marry, to do yibum with Sarah, and that was the case here, that Abba did not know that Rivka was an Ilonis going into it. Okay. Ika benayu, fine. V'iba isema, or if you want, I will say, Kones ulvasov geresh Ika benayu. Or you could say that the nafkamina between the Tanakama and Acherim is a situation when at the time that Abba married Sarah, he was still married to Rivka. And then afterwards Rivka gets divorced, right? We saw that the other day as well. Right? In a right? Does it have to be that Abba would have had to have divorced Rivka already before he married Sarah in order for Sarah to be mutter? Or could it even be that if when Abba married Sarah, he was still married to Rivka, and only then he got divorced from Rivka? In that case, still he would be permitted to Sarah, and that's exactly the case here. It's talking about a situation where at the time that Abba married Sarah, he was still married to Rivka, and only afterwards he got divorced. According to the Tanakama, that's okay, as long as when Abba died, he was already divorced from Rivka, so then Rabbi Gamliel would be allowed to do yibum with Sarah. However, according to Acherim, no, he would not, since when Abba married Sarah, he was still married to Rivka, even though he later got divorced. Rabbi Gamliel would not be able to do yibum with Sarah. However, that's why Acherim has to point out she was an Ilonis. Therefore, because she was an Ilonis, even though they only got divorced afterwards, the fact of the matter is she's an Ilonis, and therefore that is why Rabbi Gamliel was allowed to do yibum with Sarah. And finally, Iba Isema, or else if you want, I will say, Yesh Tanai Bibia Ike Benayu, that the question is, can you have some kind of a stipulation? So this is talking about a situation where when Abba married Rivka, he made a stipulation that he's only marrying her as long as he doesn't find out any kind of mum or any kind of situation why they wouldn't want to be married anymore. I don't know, some physical blemish, ich weiß nicht. I don't know, some kind of reason why you wouldn't want to be married to Rivka anymore. So the question is, can you do that? So according to the Tanakama, yes, you can. and this was a situation where Abba made a stipulation, I don't want to be married to Rivka if she's got some kind of a blemish or something. So then it turns out she has this blemish, and then so then they can't be married. So then it's clear that they're not married anymore, and therefore Sarah is not the co-wife of Rivka, and therefore Rabbi Gamliel could do Yibum with Sarah. But according to Acherim, no, that's not enough. Rivka would still be married to Abba, and therefore that's why Acherim had to say that the reason why Rabbi Gamliel was permitted to Sarah was because because Rivka was an Ilonis, and that's why Rabbi Gamliel was permitted to Sarah. Okay, moving on. Is this what we're up to? Yeah. Moser of Misharshia Asakasha, Maisad Rebakiva Shalikit Esrig Be'echod B'Shvat. Friends, this is something that we've seen at least once before, but apparently twice. That there was this incident where Rebakiva he chapterain in Esrig on the 1st of Shvat. V'nagbo Beis Isurin Echad Kedivi B'Sham V'Echad Kedivi B'Sil Shmamina Osu. Friends, did you get that? Who can tell me when Tu B'Shvat is? I'm kidding, I kind of gave it away. Tu B'Shvat, of course, is the 15th of Shvat. But what's significant about Tu B'Shvat? Well, according to Beis Hillel, Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, is Rosh Hashanah Leilonis. According to Beis Shammai, however, it's the 1st of Shvat. So one time Rabbi Akiva, he chapped an esrig on the 1st of Shvat, and he then took Meiser, and it was about to be the 3rd year of Shemitah, which means that the 3rd year is Meiser Ani, but the 2nd year is Meiser Sheni. And Rabbi Akiva, he took both Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani because seemingly he wasn't, since it was the first day of Shvat, he wasn't sure should he do like Beis Shammai and take Meiser Sheni because it's still take Meiser Ani because now it's already the 3rd year, or is it like Beis Hillel that it's still the 2nd year and therefore he should take Meiser Sheni? So he did both. So again, most of the Mishayshim, I said, Bakive, Shaliket Esrig Be'echad B'Shvat, that he chapte an Esrig on the 1st of Shvat, V'nagbo Beis Yisurin, and he took Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani, Echad Kedivi B'Shamai, V'echad Kedivi Beis Hillel, once like Beis Shammai and once like Beis Hillel, right? Meiser Sheni for Beis Hillel, and Meiser Ani like Beis Shammai. Shmamina also. So we see that clearly, out of concern for Beis Shammai's opinion, he actually did like Beis Shammai. So clearly, the people who hold like Beis Shammai did like Beis Shammai. So Bakiva, Gemari istapek lei v'lo yoda I Beis Hillel be'echod b'Shvat Amor or betu b'Shvat or betesva b'Shvat Amor. So no, it's not. We don't have to argue that by Rabbi Akiva doing like Beis Shammai, it means that Beis Shammai holds that mamish like their opinion that the first day of Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Lilanis. Rather, Rabbi Akiva just he was uncertain. Does Beis Hillel say, he forgot or whatever, does Beis Hillel say that Rosh Hashanah Lilanus is Tu B'Shvat or the 1st of Shvat? He forgot. So because he wasn't sure, so therefore, well, if he wasn't sure what Beis Hillel's opinion was, so then he was makpid, he was machmir to do like both, just in case. That's why he did Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani. But if he knew which one was Beis Shammai's opinion, he wouldn't have done like Beis Shammai, he would have only done like Beis Hillel. Most of Marzucha Asakasha. Maise, or a story, V'yolda Kalasu Shel Shammai Azakin, okay, is from Masechta Sukkah, that there was a Maise that the daughter-in-law of Shammai Hazakin gave birth on Sukkot to Yingel. Ufiches es Amazeva, and he, opened up the roof of Shtickle, V'sikei Chagabe Mita, and put schach above the bed of the Yingel, B'shvil Ka'in, for the Yingel. So Shmamina also. So because Beis Shammai holds that even little Yingelas have to do sukkah, so therefore Shmamina also. So we see that Shammai Mamish did like his opinion, and he put schach above the Yingel. So and for the Gemara Lav Davka, maybe Shammai did not necessarily do like his own opinion, but Hasama Roe Omer LaAfushe Over Kovid. Look, an onlooker might just say simply like, he's just making space over there. He only opened up the roof to make some extra space, but not necessarily because Beis Shammai does like Beis Shammai, and that and more importantly that the whole concern over here was that we don't want it to look like there's shtei Torahs. Doesn't want it to look like some people do one way, some people do another way. We don't want that to be obvious. But an onlooker will just say, he's just making space in the roof, so they won't necessarily think that there's like shtei Torahs. That's why Shammai was allowed to do it in this case. Mosiv Marzutra asked Akasha, Maise b'shokis Yehu, Shoysa b'Yushalayim. There was a Maise with the trough of Yehu that was in Jerusalem, Vaisnekuva lemikveh, and there was an opening from the trough of Yehu to a mikveh, and they would put all of the tyrus in Jerusalem in that trough to toivel. Meaning, what it means is that there was like some small gathered thing of water, and it was not 40 saw, it was too small to be a mikveh. And that was this trough thing, this trough of Yehu. However, there was a kosher mikveh right next to it, and there was a small hole that connected the trough to the mikveh. Now, according to Beis Hillel, that small hole, right, as we learned at the end of Masechta Chagiga, what do we call it? The skin, a skin bottle's tube. Friends, remember the skin bottle's tube? Even Reb Dennis, I think, posted in the Babylon Talmud WhatsApp group what a skin bottle's tube looks like, or something like that, or at least a skin bottle. I think maybe somebody else also gave some input as well, although it's slipping my mind too right now. So Maise b'shokas Yehu b'shoysa b'Yushalayim. There was a Maise with the trough of Yehu that was in Jerusalem, Vaisnekuva lemikveh, and it was open, and there was a hole connecting the trough to a kosher mikveh. And all of the when they had to bring a vessel to a mikveh in Jerusalem, so Naisa Malgaba, they would bring it to this trough, and that worked. That was enough. And Beis Shammai went and opened up the divider between the trough and the mikveh, because they felt that there needed to be more space there, that the small opening between the mikveh and the trough was not enough. Because Beis Shammai say, you need most of the divider to be open. Vitnan, and it's taught in Mishnah Eruv Mikvos, Kishvoferes Anod, that according to Beis Hillel, the way that you connect this trough, which is not a kosher mikveh, with a kosher mikveh in order to make the trough a kosher mikveh, Kishvoferes Anod, it needs to be like a skin bottle's tube. Be'ovyo v'chalala. Right, and remember I was trying to explain what a straw looks like? My sister-in-law Ashley, I think she said that my definition, my explanation, my description of a straw, I think she said it sufficed, although I can't remember. Anyways, so I was trying to explain a straw. There's like the open part of a straw, right, with the milkshake, where like the milkshake goes up, and then there's the outside, like the lip. Anyway, so we're talking about the skin bottle's tube, the space where the milkshake goes, and the cylinder itself. Be'ovyo v'chalala, okay, with its thickness and its space. Kishtei etzbos, which is also like 2 fingers worth. Chosris limkomon, okay, 2 fingers worth. Shmamina also, so we see that Beis Shammai Taka did like their own opinion. That's why they went and they opened up the divider between the trough and the mikvah. Hossam, so the Gemara says, no, there as well. No, they're only doing that just so that there's more space for the water to go through, but not necessarily because they felt that, that was the halacha and that's their opinion. So again, because it wasn't clear that, an onlooker would not say, oh wow, there's like this big machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and there's like 2 Torahs. No, that's not what they're going to say. And therefore, they're just going to say that they were making more space, and that is why they were allowed to do that. Tashma. Come in here. The Amar Belazar Reb Tzadik, says Belazar Reb Tzadik, Sheisilomi Torah Eitzer Reb Yochanan Achoroni. When I studied the Holy Torah by Reb Yochanan Achoroni Ra'isi, says Reb Belazar Reb Tzadik, I saw Shayochel Pas Chariva B'Melech B'Shnei Batzoros. That Reb Yochanan Achoroni would eat dried out bread with salt in famine years, which is shver. So Basi Vodaiti Asaba. So it says Reb Elazar Reb Tzadik. So I went and I told my father Reb Tzadik that Reb Yochanan Achoroni, look what he's eating. This is no good. So Amali Holech Lo Zaysin. So my father Reb Tzadik said, bring olives to Reb Yochanan Achoroni. So I brought him olives. Ra osan shein lachin. But Rabbi Yochanan Chorani saw that the olives were moist. Omarli, and Rabbi Yochanan Achorani said to me, says Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok, Ein ani ochel zeisim. Look, I don't eat olives. He saw that the olives were moist. He says, oh, look, that's very sweet of you, but I don't eat olives. Basu v'daiti asaba. Says Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok, so I went and I told over the Maisa to my father, Reb Tzadok. Omarli, my father said to me, Leich ve'emerlo, go and report to Rabbi Yochanan Achorani, Chavis nekuva haisa. No, don't worry. The reason why the olives are moist is because the container that the olives were in fact, had holes on the bottom. But the sort of sediments from the olives plugged up the holes, and that's why they were moist. Utnan, let's go weiter for a second, and this is significant because we learn in the Mishnah, if you have a barrel of olives that are tightly pressed together, you do not need to put a hole in it. Whereas Beis Hillel say tzricha linekev, you do need to put a hole in it. Okay, because the question is, if they get moist, so will the moisture be machshir the olives to become tameh? And Rabbi Yochanan Achorani was concerned, well, if the olives were to get moist, so then they would be mukhshir l'kabel tumah. And then if you have an Ama'aretz who touches them, it could be a problem. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan Achorani was concerned about that, and that's why he said that he doesn't eat olives. Now, according to Beis Shammai, he says, look, you don't need to put a hole at the bottom you don't have to put holes at the bottom of the container, because this, what comes out of the olives is not considered olive oil. Olive oil being one of the 7, as Rabbi Yisrael pointed out, that there are 7 mashkin, there are 7 types of liquids that can be machshir, some in the kabel tumah, and olive oil is one of them. However, according to Beis Shammai, what comes with the moisture that would come out of these olives would not be considered olive oil, and therefore it wouldn't be machshir the zeis and the kabel tumah, and therefore even if they were moist, it would be okay. However, Beis Hillel says that you do need to put a hole, right? You do have to put holes at the bottom of the container, because any of the moisture that comes out of the olives would be considered olive oil and would be machshir the olives to be able to become tameh. And therefore, however, by putting holes at the bottom, you're indicating that you're not interested in whatever comes out of the olives. And by indicating that you're not interested in whatever comes out of the olives, so then that would make them okay, because this is already liquid that you don't want. And because you don't want it, it's not machshir l'kabel tumah, and therefore you put holes in the bottom. And therefore, what was happening was that when Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok went to Rabbi Yochanan Achorani, and Rabbi Yochanan Achorani saw that the olives were moist, and Rabbi Yochanan Achorani holds like Beis Hillel, that the moisture that comes out of the olives would be considered olive oil and would be machshir these olives to become tameh. He said, look, I don't eat olives, because basically he was concerned that the olives might have become tameh from an Ama'aretz. However, let's go weiter in this Mishnah for a second. Umodim, that, as I said a minute ago, that Beis Hillel admits she'im nikva v'sasmu shmarim, that if you put holes at the bottom of the container, but then sediment plugged up the holes, and because of that reason, the olives became moist, shehi tahora, it is tahor. It is tahor. So, meaning therefore, so the point of putting the holes at the bottom is to indicate that you don't want the moisture, and because you don't want the moisture, so the moisture is not machshir the zeisim l'kabel tumah. But as long as you put the holes there, even if it gets plugged up, then it's still okay, because you already indicated that you're not interested in having the moisture. Okay, fine. Now, says the Brisa continues with the sort of anecdote with Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok and Rabbi Yochanan Achorani. V'afal pisha talmid Shammai hoyo kol ma'asav lo asa ela k'divrei Beis Hillel. And even though Reb Tzadok was a Talmud of Shammai, even though Reb Tzadok was from Beis Shammai, nonetheless, he kol ma'asav lo asa ela k'divrei Beis Hillel. Nonetheless, all of his actions he only did like Beis Hillel, right? And therefore we're pointing out that even though Shammai says that the liquids would not be machshir, does olives become tamei? Beis Hillel says that it would, and therefore Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok pointed out to Rabbi Yochanan Chorani that actually there were holes in the container, and therefore it's like Beis Hillel, and you don't have to be concerned about tumah. Now, Yomad Bishlomo also Hanu Rebuse. Now, if you say that Beis Shammai actually did like their opinion, well, that's the chiddush of Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok. That even though Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok was a student of Beis Shammai, and in general the students of Beis Shammai did like Beis Shammai, even though Reb Tzadok was a student of Beis Shammai, and in general the students of Beis Shammai did like Beis Shammai, Reb Tzadok was different in that he always did like Beis Hillel, but the implication being that all the other students of Beis Shammai would do like Beis Shammai. But if you say that in general the students of Beis Shammai didn't do like Beis Shammai anyways, then what's the chiddush that Reb Tzadok didn't do like Beis Shammai and that he did like Beis Hillel? All the students of Beis Shammai do like Beis Hillel in practice. So from the fact that we're saying that, well, Reb Elazar Reb Tzadok, even though he was a student of Beis Shammai, he did like Beis Hillel, that implies that all the other students of Beis Shammai actually did like Beis Shammai. So there you go. So that seems to be indicating that the students of Beis Shammai would actually do like Beis Shammai. Toshma, coming here. Shalus Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, so they asked Rabbi Yeshua, the great Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. Tzoras Abbas Mau. What is the deal with the tzara of the daughter? So of course you have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven's married to Sarah and Rivka. Rivka is the daughter of Shimon. What's the deal with Sarah the tzara? Amar Loi Machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. So Rabbi Yeshua says, well, machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says that Sarah does do yibum with Shimon. Beis Hillel says she does not. And then they pressed Rabbi Yeshua further. They said, okay, fine, that's helpful, but not really. Lemaise, who's the halacha like? Who do we paskin like? Amar Loim. So Rabbi Yeshua says to them, atem machnisin roshi. Why are you putting my head between two great mountains? Between two big movements in Israel. Between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Misyare oni shema yarutzu gilgalti. I'm concerned that they will sort of crush my skull. Meaning, Rabbi Yeshua was concerned that if he's going to say that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, the implication being that anybody who did like Beis Shammai and all the saras of Beis Shammai who did yibum with the shimons of Beis Shammai are the children are mamzerim, that would be a big problem, right? And the tzaras would be chayiv kares, so that would be a big problem. So Rabbi Yeshua says, look, I don't want to get involved over here. If I say the halacha is like Beis Hillel, that would be a big problem, and maybe somebody who is involved in one of those relationships between the saras and the shimons, and now they're finding out that they're chayiv kares and the children are mamzerim, they might kill me. And then Rabbi Yeshua continues. The question is, why is this relevant over here? The Gemara is going to ask later, but he continues and he says, Aval ani meid lochem, that I testify to you, al shtei mishpachos gedolos shayu b'Yerushalayim, on two great families that existed in Jerusalem, mishpachas beis tzvuim mi ben Achmoi, the family of beis tzvuim from the son of Achmoi, u mishpachas beis Kofoi mi ben Mikoshesh, and the family of beis Kofoi from ben Mikoshesh, she'em bnei tzoris, that they are the children of co-wives who did yibum with the brother of the erva. Well, with the brother, who had the erva relationship with the co-wife. Umeim kohanim gedolim, and nonetheless, from that family were Kohen Gadol, v'shimshu al gabei mizbeach, and they did service on the mizbeach. Now, we saw a minute ago that Rabbi Yeshua said, look, I don't want to get myself right into the middle of a machlokes over here. I don't want to say that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, and then somebody from Beis Shammai who, Sarah married Shimon, and now we find out that there's kares and mamzerus and all that stuff. I don't want somebody to come and kill me. So Yomad Bishlomo also anu dekam misari oni. If you say that Beis Shammai actually did like their opinion, that's why Rabbi Yeshua was concerned, because you might have actual people who are chayiv kares and children mamzerim. Eliyu Omar lo asu amai kamer misari oni. But if they didn't actually do like their own opinion, so then what's he concerned about? Nobody from Beis Shammai, none of the Saras of Beis Shammai were marrying the Shimons of Beis Shammai anyways. And now the Gemara asks, Unihi nami to asu, my misari oni. But then the Gemara says, wait, but 1 second, even according to Rabbi Yoshua though, even if you want to argue that the people of Beis Shammai, the Saras of Beis Shammai did Yibum with the Shimons of Beis Shammai, still, why should Rabbi Yoshua be concerned? Ha-Omar Rabbi Yoshua, ein mamzer ele michayve Mrs. Bezdin. That Rabbi Yoshua says that that mamzers only come from chayve Mrs. Bezdin, whereas let's say it was the sister would be a chiyuv kares and the child would not be a mamzer. So Yinami the mamzer, right? And and that's what he was asked about, right? They asked about Shalus Rabbi Yoshua Tzaras Habas. Mao, and Habas is a chiyuv kares but not a chiyuv Mrs. Bezdin, and therefore the children would not be mamzerim anyway. So what's Rabbi Yoshua concerned about? Well, Yinami the mamzer lavi pogum mehave have. Well, even though the child might not be a mamzer, he might still be a pogum. I.e., if his father was, if Shimon was a Kohen, so then the child would not be able to would not be considered a Kohen, would not be able to act as a Kohen and serve in the Beis Hamikdash, etc. Mikavachom me'almana, as a kavachomer from a widow, ma'almana she'ein isura noig bakol b'na pogum. If you have an almana who marries a Kohen Gadol, a widow is allowed to marry a Kohen, but is not allowed to marry a Kohen Gadol. If you have a widow who marries a Kohen Gadol, so that's not something that is a halacha by everybody. It's only a halacha in the context of the Kohen Gadol. And yet, b'na pogum, the child of an almana to a Kohen Gadol would be pogum. Zo she'asur she'isur shavu bakol chule. Right? This situation where, to everybody, this is shaykh. Right? Whenever you have a Sarah who's married to Rivka, who's the daughter of Shimon, that applies equally to everybody. That in every case, in every instance, it would not be allowed. So then certainly the child is going to be pogum, and that's what Rabbi Yoshua was concerned about. Even if the child might not be a mamzer, the child might still be pogum, and that's why he was concerned. And from the fact that he was concerned, it sounds like Beis Shammai really actually did like their opinion. Now, frek the Gemara. Kabo mine tzaris v'kalpashale b'nei tzaris. So the Gemara asks, 1 second, I don't understand. The people asked from Rabbi Yoshua about the tzaris, right? And what was the question? I'm going to back up about 20 lines. Tashma shalos Rabbi Yoshua tzaris abas mao. What's the halacha with Sarah? Sarah, who's the tzara of Rivka. The kapashale b'nei tzaris, and then all of a sudden he starts talking about how there were these two families and they had children, and the children were even Kohen Gadol. Why are they talking about children over here? So they asked him two things. Tzaris mai. What's the halacha legabe Sarah, the tzara? And if you're going to say that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, if you're going to say that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, that Sarah does not do Yibum with Shimon and she can marry some random dude named Levi, well then B'nei Tzaris de Beis Hillel le Beis Shammai mau. Well then the according to Beis Shammai, what happens, right? Meaning, according to Beis Hillel, Sarah does not do Yibum with Shimon, and she can marry some random dude named Levi. Now, Beis Shammai, however, says 1 second, Sarah needs to do Yibum. In which case, when she marries Levi, that's not allowed. So then, what's the deal with the children? Would they be considered chalols? Can they? So that's why he said. That they no, then they wouldn't be considered chalols. They can even serve as a Kohen Gadol. So l'may nafkamina, who cares what Beis Shammai would hold in this case? So the Mifshit Vlad Machzig Rishaso. So because it helps us understand what happens in a situation when you have a right. We talked about the other day where Ruvain is married to Sarah, and Ruvain and Sarah get divorced. Sarah then marries some random guy named Levi, and then Levi either dies or they get divorced, and then she remarries Ruvain even though she's not allowed to, and then they have a child. So what's the status of that child? So we want to understand, right? What would be the status of the child of the Machzor Grusha Beis Hillel according to Beis Hillel? So Mikamrinon, do we say Kavachomer. So do we say the following Kavachomer? Almana the Kohen Gadol. When you have a widow who marries a Kohen Gadol, she'ein isur shavu bakol, that the isur is not equal to everybody. This widow is allowed to marry a regular Kohen, just not a Kohen Gadol. Bina pagum, and yet her child is pagum. So zo she'isur shavu bakol. So when it comes to malzig rushaso, which applies to everybody, nobody's allowed to remarry somebody they were married to originally if they married somebody else in between. So enudin she bina pagum. Well, then certainly the child in that case should be pagum. Oldima, or perhaps ikal mifrach. Maybe you can ask. Ma la'amana she atzma mischalelas, but an almana herself becomes mischalelas. Meaning, if you have a widow is allowed to marry a Kohen, she's just not allowed to marry a Kohen Gadol. If she marries a Kohen Gadol nonetheless, well then she herself becomes mischalelas. She can no longer marry a Kohen. So maybe that makes the almana of the Kohen Gadol more stringent. But let's say a machzir grushaso, maybe the child would be okay. So v'amalu tsaros misyari oni. And Rabbi Yeshua says, look, I'm concerned about the tsaris. The tsaris, I'm concerned about right there. Maybe they'll be upset that the tsaris themselves might be cholos. But b'nei tsaris ani meid lachem. That Rabbi Yeshua is saying that, look, when it comes to the children, it would be okay. Because we have that case of the children that they even became Kohen Gadols, and Beis Shammai didn't seem to have an issue with that, so the children would be okay. And then that, I guess, is applied also to the situation of Machzir Grushaso, that in that case also the children would not be Chalols or anything. Friends, that was Daf Tes Vav of Masechta Yevamos. So at the beginning of the Daf, we saw Machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel about, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri proposed that maybe we should just do Chalitza in every case. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was a little bit concerned that if we do chalitza in every case, well then what happens to the previous, so what happens to sort of previous, people who married, we're going to tell them to now do chalitza. That can kind of create like weird vibes. Okay, fine. Cool. Well, there was actually two ways to understand it, right? Meaning, initially we wanted to say with the fact that we're concerned about the previous examples means that Beis Shammai actually did like their teachings, and that's why we're concerned about, kares and things like that. But then we say, no, it's they didn't necessarily do like their teachings, but we're just concerned like, well, now do you do chalitza and it gets awkward and stuff like that. Okay, and there was an interesting story with Rabbi Gamliel where he did yibum with his the tzara of his daughter who was married to his brother Abba. We gave three different ways how that could be. Maybe she was an Ilonis, or maybe different reasons. And then we brought a few different examples where we would try to prove that Beis Shammai actually did like their own teachings. We rebuffed a few of them, but then actually a few of them got through, where actually it did imply that Beis Shammai actually did like their own teachings. All right, well, that was interesting. Peace.